Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Welcome. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. A class action lawsuit against the Alberta government will be moving ahead, brought forward by business owners who lost so much during the pandemic. The province introduced new legislation it says will enforce food safety and prevent the sale and distribution of illegal meat. And the U.S. presidential election is just around the corner. We hear from political correspondent Lisa Daftari, who explains who the frontrunner is.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre slammed the Trudeau government on Canada's economy. He says a recent report by Stats Canada does not paint a rosy picture for our country.
It grew at a meager 1%, a third lower than foreseen, and lower than our population grew. In fact, it was the 8th out of the last 9th economic quarter where our per capita GDP shrunk. It's fallen more than any other G7 country since the year before COVID. This is the direct result of higher taxes on capital gains, on energy, on work. Why won't they accept our common sense plan? Better yet, why don't they call a carbon tax election so we can fix the economy?
There's a lot of chocolate being consumed on the other side. You can see how energized the Conservatives are, but they're upset because we're sharing the facts. 1.6% inflation in this country. Interest rates are down, 47,000 new jobs in the last month. The International Monetary Fund has Canada positioned as the fastest growing economy in the G7 in 2025. What else, Mr. Speaker? We're going to keep supporting Canadians. We're going to build houses from coast to coast. The Conservatives don't need to like it, but that's how we're supporting Canadians each and every day.
Federal Health Minister Mark Collins says more than 1 million Canadians have received care through the National Dental Care Program. Now, the initiative, which began 6 months ago, covers seniors, those with disabilities, and children. Holland says as of today, the program will also provide coverage for more complex pre-authorized procedures such as crowns and partial denture placements.
On average, it saves somebody $730. And that's a big deal at a time where global costs are increasing. But it's also a big deal because it's a fundamental matter of dignity. I mean, one of the first things I did was visit a clinic in Vanier and two denturists named Dan and Jack. And they said they have a woman very early, first days of this program, came in 40 years, the same pair of dentures. It was down to like plastic plates in her mouth that she was crunching her food painfully every day. And now she has a new pair of teeth.
Minister Holland says his government is on track to begin expanding who can get coverage under the program next year. No exact date has been announced just yet. A number of Alberta business owners impacted by the lockdowns and restrictions incurred during the COVID-19 pandemic are now celebrating. A judge granted certification for a class action lawsuit to move ahead against the Alberta government. The class action, led by Rebecca Ingram and Christopher Scott, sought to certify a class on behalf of the many Alberta business owners who lost so much during the pandemic. Justice Feasby of the Court of King's Bench of Alberta said the lawsuit can now move forward. Now, to chat about this in more detail is lawyer Jeff Rath with the law firm Rath & Company, lead counsel for the case, and he joins us now from Calgary. Jeff, what will this potentially mean for so many business owners who lost so much during the COVID-19 pandemic?
It gives individual business owners who were illegally shut down by Jason Kenney and Dina Hinshaw throughout the pandemic the ability to claim for damages against the Alberta government, both for violations of the rights under the Alberta Bill of Rights, in negligence, and in under a tort called misfeasance in public office. And one of the remarkable things about the judgment is that the judge found that the claim for misfeasance in public office can go forward. He found that there was a very plausible claim to be made out, that when Jason Kenney and his cocktail cabinet decided to hide behind Dina Hinshaw's skirts and pretend that the political decisions that they were making to shut down certain businesses while leaving other businesses open were not purely political decisions and were public health decisions, that constituted misfeasance in public office. And the judge actually certified our ability to seek not just damages, but punitive damages against the Alberta government.
So what kind of financial compensation will your clients be seeking here?
As a class in the billions, but I mean, what we'd be looking at is, each individual, the damages have to be calculated, on the basis of actual losses. I mean, some businesses, very easy to calculate losses. I was talking to one physiotherapist as an example, who advised me that, his weekly billings would be $25,000 a week. And he goes, yeah, and I was shut down for 6 weeks. So, my losses were $150,000. You can just do the math that quickly, right?
Jeff, some people would say the taxpayers are going to suffer the most here because this is really a case of business owners suing the Alberta government. I mean, Jason Kenney's not even premier anymore.
On what basis should those small businesses bear the brunt of the cost of the government's public health measures? Society as a whole should be bearing that cost. The other thing I say to that is that, unfortunately for the government of Alberta, Jason Kenney and Dina Hinshaw ostensibly were doing the things that they did on behalf of the government of Alberta. So the liability rests with the government, even though, the people making the horrible decisions are no longer there.
So how long do you see this case potentially dragging out?
United Conservative Party AGM is this weekend. I'm hoping that lots of people are going to that AGM, start encouraging Danielle Smith to settle. Everybody watching this, needs to remind Danielle that this is just going to get worse and worse for the government. I mean, the court has opened the door to punitive damages against the Alberta government. Like, when has that ever happened? That'll tell you how bad this looks and how seriously the court is looking at what it was that was done by issuing these phony health orders so that Jason Kenney and company wouldn't be responsible for orders that were issued under the Emergencies Act.
Thanks so much for your time today, Jeff. That was Jeff Rath, legal counsel representing business owners suing the Alberta government for damages incurred during the lockdown mandates of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Alberta government introduced new legislation to enforce food safety and to prevent the sale and distribution of illegal meat. Now, if passed, the Meat Inspection Amendment Act would increase fines from a maximum of $10,000 to $100,000 for each offense. The fine is only the first change.
The second proposed change is to extend the time allowed to investigate and lay charges. The current time is 1 year following the date the offense took place. The proposed change will increase the limitation period to 2 years from the date an offense came to an investigator's attention. This would give us more time to thoroughly investigate complex cases and prosecute those who break the law.
Government officials say the proposed changes would support food safety without increasing consumer costs for inspected meat or operating costs for the industry. An area of Lebanon which is predominantly Christian is now seeing a huge influx of people who are fleeing the battle between the terrorist group Hezbollah and the Israel Defense Forces.
بظل الانذار العدواني لمنطقة بعلبك كان في زحف بشري على منطقة الدير الأحمر. الطريق هي 17 كيلومتر، كانت موقف سيارات، أكيد تدفق عشرات الآلاف. هيدي أول مرة نشهد هالكارثة الكبيرة هيدي. أكيد نحن عندنا 12,000 نازح بمراكز إيواء، 2,500 وتقريبا 9,000 عند أهلنا وببيوتهم مستضيفين. فبالتالي امبارح لقى كان الموضوع بمشهدية كارثية.
According to TBN Israel correspondent Yair Pinto, the IDF has a goal of completely dismantling the terrorist group Hezbollah in Lebanon. He says that recently included the Israel military capturing another Hezbollah member. Pinto also explains if another hostage deal between Hamas and Israel is any closer to being finalized.
The IDF has begun a new phase of operations with the goal of completely eliminating Hezbollah. Following the announcement that 71-year-old Naim Qassem will replace Hassan Nasrallah as the organization's Secretary General. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant says the appointment is temporary. The countdown has begun. In the meantime, the IDF continues to operate in southern Lebanon, capturing a senior Hezbollah commander and destroying more underground bunkers and tunnels, eliminating dozens of terrorists and attacking over 150 targets from the air. In the Gaza Strip, the IDF published details of the operation in Jabalia that have left Hamas in shock. The IDF is preventing Hamas from reestablishing itself in the northern Gaza Strip and is continuing to guard the Philadelphia corridor in the south to prevent fresh supplies of weapons and ammunition from being smuggled to the terrorist organization Hamas. In a related story, negotiations meant to bring an end to the ordeal of Israel's hostages in Gaza are also continuing, with the outline discussed in Doha, Qatar, and the parties to the negotiations issuing statements indicating cautious optimism that an agreement is near.
Well, it was another beautiful day here in Lethbridge. Lots of sunshine and fairly mild, too. Jeanette Rocher is now with an early look at the forecast. Jeanette, fortunately for the little trick-or-treaters, no snow in the forecast, but it might be a little chilly.
Yeah, Hal, it might not be a bad idea to have them put on a jacket underneath those costumes. It's going to be chilly, but you know what? It's not going to be horrible because we're still looking at plus temperatures even right up until midnight. It's really not until we get into the early morning hours of Friday that we're going to feel that minus wind chill. But today, even we exceeded our daytime high of 6 degrees. We got up to 7, 8 degrees, and that will continue this evening. So by 6, 7 o'clock, we're still looking at 4 degrees, 3 degrees. So a little bit chilly, but not as bad as we initially thought. Into Friday, we're looking at lots of sunshine and back up to 9 degrees, and it's going to get double digits by Saturday. I'll be back later in the show to tell you all about that.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. A member of the Lethbridge Police Service has been charged in an off-duty incident. Now, the constable, who will not be named for privacy reasons, is charged with criminal harassment, mischief, and unlawful dwelling in a house. Police say it's in relation to domestic-related matters. The 20-year member of the service was arrested by RCMP on Tuesday and has been suspended with pay. The officer and his family are now being offered supports by police during the court process. A 27-year-old man has been charged with aggravated assault in connection with a fight at a bar last Saturday. Lethbridge police say when they arrived on scene at the business located along the 3500 block of Mayor McGrath Drive South, they found a 19-year-old who'd been knocked out by a security guard. The teenager left the scene and headed to Chinook Regional Hospital for treatment for a head injury and then was airlifted to Calgary in critical condition. Police say during their investigation, the 19-year-old left a lineup waiting to get inside the business when he was approached by the security guard, punched in the face, and fell to the ground, striking his head on the pavement. The teenager was discharged from hospital on Wednesday and is recovering. The security guard, whose name is being withheld, faces one charge of aggravated assault. He was released from custody but will appear in court on November the 27th. A public safety networking meeting was held at Lethbridge Polytechnic. Now, groups such as the RCMP, police services from across Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, along with Canadian Armed Forces, participated in the event to offer up their expertise. BCN's Heidi Echeverria has the story.
To provide opportunities for the public, our students, to identify some pathways into public safety careers. So we have 26 different agencies that are here representing their different possible outcomes or job opportunities for students, and we're trying to find the ways that individuals, the public, our students can connect to those agencies to find career opportunities, but also to figure out what are the things that they also need to do along the way.
Among the students who attended the event, Wayne Baulik is a first-year student of the Criminal Justice Police Program, and he was persuaded by receiving information about what he and his mother dreamed for him.
I've thought about the RCMP because my mom told me that she'd want to see me like in the suit and everything. So it was definitely like something I've thought about. But obviously, like being here and learning more and more about everybody else, I have to keep my mind open to like all the different opportunities. Knowing your self-worth, that was like the most important thing to learn while you're in there. And like just taking every little victory and not letting yourself like get down, because it is a hard process and you have to remind yourself that it's not a process everybody is able to do, and just being able to achieve the little things is still a big achievement because most people don't get to do it. There's like different sections of the RCMP, like not everybody has to do the same thing, and everybody has different skills, and those different skills can be applied to different sections in the RCMP.
For his part, Ethan Kozak was also interested in seeking information from one of the police services. And although he considered possibly doing so in the future, his plan is to graduate as a police officer.
Health service peace officers specifically said that they like help people that are in hospitals. So like when situations kind of like rise, they're just there just to make sure that public safety is like obviously key aspect of their job, and like most other jobs here. And they're just there to just kind of supervise for those who kind of going through a hard time in a hospital. I'm going to stick with policing just because that's what I've been interested in for a while and what I've been doing my research in. But obviously that could be another path that I take, saying that I'm like doing a program that's kind of like related.
About 103 students registered for the event to receive information to identify pathways into the public safety careers. For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echavarria.
Addiction is still an issue that impacts so many, including our First Nations communities. Kirby Manyfingers, advisor with Guy Children's Services, says removing kids from First Nations homes where those who are battling addictions is kind of like reliving what happened during the 60s scoop.
You know, there's the passage of Bill C-92, which allows First Nations to enact their own laws and child welfare system and to base things on their own traditions and customs. What we're dealing with is foreign. You know, our children are removed. And it's very similar to what happened in residential school. You know, they were removed from their homes. The culture was eliminated. So it almost has, it's almost like residential school all over again. As part of the protection, it's paramount that we keep the family unit together. Once the child is removed from the family unit, they're actually more at risk in the existing system.
According to Crossroads Family Services here in Alberta, there are over 3,000 children who currently live in around 1,800 foster homes. Well, if you have children who participate in local hockey programs, you may be able to watch them from home fairly soon. Live Barn, an on-demand and hockey live streaming service, announced their introduction to the city of Lethbridge and the coverage of local sports teams in 5 arenas here in the city. As of Thursday, Live Barn is streaming from Henderson, Labour Club, and Nicholas Sharon arenas, with Logan Boulet and Cavendish Farm Centre to come online in mid-November.
It's really cool technology. So it's actually motion censored technology. Once there are more than 2 skaters on the ice, the cameras start rolling. And then when you have your subscription, all you do is either log on to livebarn.com, find your arena, and then start viewing. Or we do have app options. So through Android and iOS-based apps, you can download the app and watch from there. As far as games, we have everything from ringettes to Lethbridge minor hockey that are in our facilities, as well as some of our recreation leagues and our local figure skating clubs.
Such a cool concept. Live Barn is also offering residents a 10% discount on their subscriptions as an introductory incentive. Well, the Los Angeles Dodgers are now World Series champions following a stunning 7-6 victory over the New York Yankees. The Dodgers took this series in 5 games. The team plans to commemorate their championship Friday with a downtown parade followed by a celebration at Dodger Stadium.
This is a wonderful day, and I know that the Dodgers plane just landed and they were greeted with a salute from the fire department, and we can't wait to see them back here. As we prepare for tomorrow, we will work to keep Angelenos safe, as always, alleviate traffic, and ensure that we welcome the Dodgers back home in style and safety. Our LAPD and LAFD partners have been preparing for this parade extensively and have strategic plans in place that will be implemented both downtown and throughout the city. I again want to urge Angelenos to celebrate responsibly. Violence of any kind will not be tolerated. Arrests were made, unfortunately, following instances of violence and destruction last night, and LAPD investigators are ongoing to hold accountable people who were involved.
Hopefully people will be safe, and congratulations once again to the LA Dodgers, World Series champions. Well, we enjoyed lots of blue sky again today, but it was fairly cool tonight. If you're heading out, bundle up as the mercury will be dropping below 0 once again. Complete weather details are coming up. It was another beautiful day across much of southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Rocher is now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, for the little trick-or-treaters tonight, they better bundle up, however, since it might be a little chilly.
Well, a little bit chilly, not as bad as we initially thought. So even this evening by 6, 7 o'clock tonight, we're looking at 4 degrees, 3 degrees, and it should remain above zero right up until past midnight. So it's really not until the early morning hours of Friday that we're going to see the negative wind chill factors, and then back up to 9 degrees on Friday with lots of sunshine. So we're not doing it too badly. And then look at that. On Saturday, we're back into double digits there, 11 degrees, back to 6 on Sunday, 9 degrees on Monday. Next Tuesday, looking at 6, and then all the way up to 12 degrees on Wednesday. So we're definitely sticking within this range and even a little bit higher some days. So average high for this time of year now is 8 degrees. I don't know if you've noticed, that's actually gone down. I believe it was just yesterday that was sitting at 9 degrees. Average low, -5. 22 was our record high, happening back in 2008 on this day. And in 1919, on this day, we were sitting at -22. So the sun rose this morning at 8:20. Sun set this evening at 6:09. So we're now seeing 9 hours and 49 minutes of daylight. So we're 4 minutes shorter than we were today. By the way, clocks go back this weekend. We're looking at double digits on the island there. So 10 degrees tomorrow in Victoria, looking at periods of rain though. Looking at 30% chance of showers in Vancouver, 8 degrees for the high, 2 in Edmonton and 6 in Calgary. Looking at partly cloudy skies and mainly clear skies there in Calgary. As we get to the rest of the prairies, same thing, partly cloudy skies, 8 in Saskatoon. 6 rather in Saskatoon, 8 degrees in Regina, and 7 in Winnipeg. As we get to more of the east coast and central portion of the country, we're seeing a little bit of rain tomorrow. So Toronto seeing some showers, 11 for the high, 13 in Ottawa, and 17 degrees in Montreal. Still sitting at lovely high teen temperatures, but looking at that rain, also some windy conditions in a couple of those cities as well, up to 60-kilometer-per-hour winds. 21 tomorrow in Fredericton, seeing some showers in Halifax, 19 for the high, 18 in Charlottetown as well, with 30% chance of showers and 60% chance of rain in St. John's tomorrow with a high of 13 degrees. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
The economy stalled in August, but a preliminary estimate suggests it still grew at 1% in the third quarter. Stats Canada says growth in services-producing industries in August were offset by declines in goods-producing industries. The manufacturing sector was the largest drag on the economy. That was followed by utilities, wholesale and trade, along with transportation and warehousing. The Bank of Canada has described the economy as soft, largely due to high interest rates weighing on consumption and business investment. Fuel retailer Parkland has lowered its full-year earnings forecast. Sluggish market conditions continue to take a bite out of the margins at the company's BC refinery. The Calgary-based group is experiencing similar challenges to refiners around the globe as the industry deals with a glut of fuel supply and weak global economic conditions that have reduced demand. Parkland said Wednesday after the close of markets that it's lowering its full-year 2024 adjusted earnings guidance to between $1.7 and $1.75 billion. Now that's down from a previous forecast of between 1.9 and 2 billion. Volkswagen says it needs to significantly cut costs as it reports a steep decline in third quarter earnings. The company reported a 64% drop in net earnings for the quarter compared to the same period a year ago. The numbers come just 2 days after the head of Volkswagen's Works Council said management had informed employee representatives that it wants to close at least 3 plants in Germany. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 350 points on the day to finish at 24,156. The Dow was down 378 points to 41,763. The S&P 500 was down 108 on the day to 5705. And the Nasdaq was down 512 points to 18,095. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.91 to $70.52 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 14 cents to $2.70 US. Gold was down 43.01 on the day to $27.44.02 US an ounce, and silver was down $1.10 to $32.66 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.38 per bushel, barley's at $6.25, canola's at $14.72, and corn is at $7.47 per bushel. Live cattle were up $4.60 to $193. Feeder cattle were up $1.02 to $251.97, and lean hogs' December contract was down 57 cents to $83.80. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to $71.89 US. Recapping one of our top stories, a number of Alberta business owners impacted by the lockdowns and restrictions incurred during the pandemic are celebrating. A judge granted certification for a class action lawsuit to move forward against the Alberta government. The class action, led by Rebecca Ingram and Christopher Scott, sought to certify a class on behalf of the many Alberta business owners who lost so much during the COVID-19 pandemic. The U.S. presidential election is just around the corner now. It's a pretty tight race, too, between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. One candidate, however, is leading in a number of swing states. U.S. political correspondent Lisa Daftari will share details with us momentarily. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews. The U.S. federal election is less than a week away now. Now, the polls say it's too close to call at this point in time. To talk about the upcoming presidential election in more detail is Lisa Daftari, American political correspondent and host of the Foreign Desk, joining us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, it appears to be a dead heat nationally. The battle continues for swing states and key constituencies ahead of the November 5th election. Many feel two of the pivotal battlegrounds right now will be Michigan and Georgia. How are you seeing it?
Yeah, I mean, we've heard Michigan, Georgia, Pennsylvania, they'll all be quite important. It's interesting because you have, the system of the Electoral College, and then it always just comes down to a handful of states really deciding the fate of the nation. In this case, we are hearing all kinds of things, but we'll go with what we're hearing from the mainstream media, which is that they are pretty much even, 50-50 right now, anyone's game, and that the swing states seem to be going in the direction of Donald Trump. Now, they will also count the mail-in ballots as they come in, and if they are postmarked by the date of the election, they will be counted afterwards. That's what kind of scares us here, and that they won't be announced perhaps on election night. That's going to affect markets. That's going to affect, obviously, confidence in the United States. It looks very bad on the international stage when we can't decisively call an election. What will be the reaction on the streets if one candidate is called over the other? And really, what will there be cheating? I mean, there, as you know, have been several instances already where it looks like there is foul play. And one side calls foul play, the other one says you just, trying to, stir the pot. More of the same, right? How this is what we expected between these two candidates. Unfortunately, we have to say it's anyone's game. A lot of the polls showing Donald Trump leading by a significant amount, the mainstream media refuting that. So we will have to wait until election day or perhaps later than that to find out the ultimate answer.
So how can the American electorate really have confidence in the entire process that there won't be cheating and that these voting machines, there won't be anything nefarious happening and taking place here?
Right. And then how can we, to add to your questions, how can we ensure that we will have a fair election in the future or in any election once we've introduced mail-in ballots and voting that goes beyond in-person voting for one day? So where I live, the polls have been open and people are voting early. They recommend that because then you can follow your ballot. You could follow that your vote has been counted. What will happen on election day? Will there be more outages? How can people really ensure it? But more than anything, the fact that these questions are being raised and they will be raised in the future, it really throws into question and really questions the legitimacy of the United States process, which therefore then weakens us, in terms of our foreign policy, in terms of our economy. We look at what's happening with BRICS. We're looking at the dollar being undermined. We're looking at the markets and how they will react to whether it will be a Kamala victory or a Trump victory. This is all very, very important. When we're talking about just a handful of days away from really seeing all of this either, collapse or explode in an opposite direction, it already is a very precarious situation, and that in and of itself creates vulnerability for the United States on all fronts.
We've seen a lot of videos going viral on social media, some of Kamala Harris dancing in the streets, dancing with other people, Donald Trump working the drive-thru at McDonald's. In your opinion, what's really been resonating with American voters when it comes to both Trump and Harris?
You know, I'm seeing a lot of going back to just common sense politics. And that's actually a relief because that's not what we were seeing in the beginning of these two campaigns, particularly when Kamala Harris entered the race. It became crunch time and there was a lot of just smearing on both sides. There still is name calling the Trump voters trash as President Biden did, and then Donald Trump wearing the garbage vest and driving the truck. I mean, look, I was, you know, in my mind, I cover foreign policy. So I'm thinking, what are our enemies thinking watching, you know, these two, you know, act the way that they are, about to assume, one of them will assume the most important job in the entire world, and look at the way that they're behaving. So, you know, when we come back to the swing states, when we come back to jobs, when we come back to a safe border, when we come back to the price of groceries, the price of gasoline, really common sense politics here in Los Angeles, a lot of people talking about crime. One of the biggest things that people are going out to vote for here in Los Angeles is to remove the DA, Gascon, who has really made this city into a horrible nightmare of a place where you can't even have lunch during the day without being fearful of being mugged. And I think that shows a lot. People are putting politics aside, putting their party aside, and voting for the common sense candidate who will stop the crime and will, you know, bring back, you know, consequences for all types of crimes and burglaries and such. So I think, again, Americans going back to common sense, you know, the pendulum is swinging in all sorts of directions, but I do think that Americans are affected, both on the left and the right, more so on the left, with a very extreme agenda. The Democrats of today, Walz and Harris, are very different than the Democrats of, you know, Bill Clinton's time and beyond. So, you know, it's I think a lot of people coming to their senses and saying, you know, we want to bring the country back to the center. And it might take to the next, you know, presidential election cycle to really bring in candidates that represent American values on both sides, and really, you know, make that their choice. Donald Trump, obviously, somebody who, you know, people try to kind of diminish him as somebody who had those mean tweets. But I think a lot of Americans do find that his policies were middle of the road. They were representative of American values. They did defend our democracy. Our economy was doing much better. Our border was safe. Crimes were down. Prices were down. And perhaps that's what's drawing a lot of those people in the swing states to vote for him. But again, we have to wait to see how that all ends.
Let's talk about the running mates here for just a moment. J.D. Vance and Tim Walz. From what you've witnessed so far, Lisa, who's had the stronger campaign?
You know, it obviously becomes Vance because he's a polished candidate. He speaks well. He's well educated. And if you saw the debate between the two, it was a no-brainer as to his performance versus Walz's performance. But I say that with the, you know, also bringing into the conversation the fact that a lot of Americans look at Walz and make the argument that, well, he's one of us. He's an average American. He's not polished. He doesn't speak as eloquently as Vance does, and Vance therefore is, you know, fake and a politician, and he's from, you know, this and that, and he's privileged and he's that, and you know, he does come from humble roots, and he brought himself to where he is, Vance, and then Walz trying to really just represent the people and be kind of the guy next door and all of that. But I think it will come down to policy. I think one of the things that Americans are watching very closely right now is who will best take the country forward. It's not a good tagline for the Kamala Harris and Tim Walz campaign to say turn the page when they're the ones who are in office right now. So it's a little bit of a confusion for people. Some people are drinking the Kool-Aid and understand that this was a phenomenal PR campaign that really made people think that Kamala's change, where it's more of the same. And obviously Donald Trump was already president, and that will be more of the same. So the waters are definitely muddied, Hal. We shall see how this all plays out.
Hey, the Democratic Political Action Committee published internal Trump campaign emails after an Iranian hacking group reportedly leaked them. Lisa, according to Reuters, the hackers recently started trying to pass off the emails to various media outlets which were uninterested in publishing the content.
I really want to connect the dots on this one because it is not only an influence campaign, it's not only an interference campaign. Think about this, Hal. When our enemies, are rogue nations of the world and governments of the world, are in cahoots with one party over the other and have a preference in our presidential election.
Foreign interference. We have that here in Canada too. Yeah.
Absolutely. And there's really a problem when our friends and enemies believe that one candidate over the other will treat them differently with regards to our foreign policy. Our foreign policy, whether you're talking about Canada, the United States, European nations, if we truly want to defend the democracy that we stand for, our foreign policy has to be even across the board, regardless of which candidate is in office, left, right, or center. They have to be fearful. They have to know that there will be deterrence, not to actually not only endorse a candidate, but actively work to get one candidate in office and make death threats against the other candidate. This is a major issue. And if the Democrats don't see this as an issue on both sides, as an issue against Americans in general and against the system, we're going to have major issues down the road, whether it's Chinese influence, Russian influence, the Islamic Republic influence, Qatari influence, whatever it is, they are here. They know that they can penetrate, and they have launched successful campaigns, and that's why they're doing it once again.
Let's talk about the war now between Israel and Iran. Lisa, the Israeli military has been hitting Iran pretty hard. The Jewish state says it will continue to go on the offense against the world's worst state sponsor of terrorism, the Islamic Republic, if Tehran responds.
Right. So this war, as of October 7th, and before that as well, has always been between the Islamic Republic and Israel, because all these proxies are funded by the Islamic Republic. So we're looking at a war between Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis and the Islamic Republic itself, because direct missiles are coming from Iran's soil into Israel. So all these different fronts being funded by the Islamic Republic, and the United States, trying to normalize relations with the Islamic Republic, having this administration and the Obama administration having given billions of dollars to the Islamic Republic. That's the money that they have gone on this terror spree with. That is the money that they are spending to give to their terror proxies to carry out these attacks. Now, we just saw Israel retaliate against the Islamic Republic for the attacks in April. Very measured, very targeted, and we're happy about that aspect of it. We don't want the Iranian people in harm's way. Obviously, they are the ones who are also against their government. But how much of this was Israel having to be restrained by an upcoming election here in the United States, an administration who wants this war to go away very, very badly and wants the optics to be very clean going into election day. It really interfered. The fact that we're in an election cycle really interfered with this war. We tied Israel's hands. We micromanaged them. We waited on giving them weapons where they are our main ally. They're the ones doing the dirty work for the West in the Middle East, fighting the same enemies who would be killing any one of us, and yet we failed them. We failed them to a major extent, but we're happy for Israeli intelligence and the fact that they can get ahead of this, and what we saw them do in Lebanon, for example, or the targeted attacks on Hezbollah heads and Hamas heads showed that there is, Israeli intelligence that will eventually be victorious in fighting against good versus evil and in this fight against terrorism. So here we are. We're hoping that this war does come to an end very, very soon, and that the casualties will just stop. This is very, very senseless.
And Lisa, on another note, 7 Israeli nationals were indicted for allegedly receiving at least $300,000 in cash and cryptocurrency from the Islamic Republic to carry out more than 600 acts of espionage targeting Israel.
Right. So this is yet again the influence campaign that the Islamic Republic has attempted to carry out among Israelis, but has failed. There hasn't been one successful case yet, but we're hearing about many of these foiled. Again, this morning, there were 4 individuals that have been identified as those who have been basically paid by and kind of worked together with the Islamic Republic to carry out their dirty work, spies, basically. But again, it hasn't worked. So, Israeli intelligence has to stay on top of this. I mean, they have to get it right 100% of the time, and the terrorists have to get it right once. So this is what we're seeing. And, it's unfortunate. You'll always find people who could be bought out, and you'll always find these nefarious actors who want to kill and want to extend their influence. And so, here we are.
It's now confirmed as well, Lisa, that North Korean troops have not only been training in Russia, but now will go to war and fight for Russia against Ukraine. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he needs more help and is asked to join NATO. Now, if that goes ahead, could we potentially see another world war?
Right. You know, this is something most people are not paying attention to, but instead of diminishing this war with Russia invading Ukraine, we have seen it expand. Just in the last week alone, we're seeing North Koreans in uniform march towards this war and insert themselves in this war. This also points to another issue here about the just containing North Korea and isolating them. That's another fail on the world stage, and particularly with regards to world powers and being able to isolate, to sanction, to stop North Korea. We haven't been able to normalize relations with them. We haven't been able to, have them, back down from their nuclear, portfolio. But we now see them bleeding out into the world conflicts and joining forces with other rogue elements. Just in the 4 years alone, the past 4 years alone, we have seen so much of this. These strange bedfellows, not strange, anymore with regards to, China and Iran working together, and you have, Russia now working together with North Korea, and they're all selling weapons to one another. This is very, very problematic. With regards to this war, now Zelensky, he kept coming and asking for more and more and more, and we were kind of rolling our eyes and saying, to what end will the United States and others be giving money and resources into this war? But then now, he may have a point. If this war is expanding and it affects all of us, then Russia needs to be stopped. The North Koreans need to be stopped. The Islamic Republic needs to be stopped. China needs to be stopped. So how will this end? Will it expand into a world war, or will we be able to finally get this de-escalated?
We'll see how it all plays out. She's our foreign affairs expert and U.S. political reporter, Lisa Daftari. Thanks so much for joining us once again from Los Angeles.
Thank you so much.
Child abuse isn't something we typically like to talk about, but I think we can all agree it needs to stop. Joining us today is Christine Cassie. She is the CEO of Chinook Sexual Assault Center in Lethbridge. Christine, thanks so much for joining us today. I appreciate having you on.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. First off, can you maybe give us a brief overview of what the Chinook Sexual Assault Center does?
Well, the Chinook Sexual Assault Center has two main programs. One is the Sexual Assault Center, which provides a range of services from crisis intervention to therapy, including peer support groups, what we call system navigation. So sometimes people's lives just aren't going as well as what they'd hope they'd be because they're dealing with the impacts of the trauma that they're experiencing. So we'll help negotiate their way through certain systems that they want to deal with. We also provide specialized police and court support as well. So for those people who do want to go forward to report to police, because there's no statute of limitations in Canada, we will support them through that process all the way through to the court process with that as well. Beyond that, we also have our signature program, the Child and Youth Advocacy Center, which is also called Chinook. Can never use that name enough, it seems. Chinook Child and Youth Advocacy Center deals with children 0 to 17 years of age that have been identified through children's services or through policing services throughout southwestern Alberta that have been abused, and either sexually abused, severe physical abuse, or severe neglect, or have been exposed to domestic violence. And so we actually broker the child forensic interviews to be done in a child-friendly, culturally sensitive space that we host, as well as then supporting the non-offending family members and the child throughout the court process, and how they learn to heal through therapy and other resources that we have here.
Well, pretty heavy stuff that you're dealing with over there, Christine, for sure. Like I said earlier, child abuse, of course, isn't a topic we love to talk about, but you believe that it is, in fact, important to have those conversations about the issue.
Absolutely. What we know from the stats, both from a prevalence study that was done through the Alberta Association of Sexual Assault Services and stats that we get through policing agencies and child welfare agencies across Canada, is that it impacts about 1 in 3 kids. And so we look at a 34% prevalence rate really for child sexual abuse alone. In the city of Lethbridge, that would mean about 6,800 kids that may be impacted by some form of sexual abuse or some sort of sexual violation. So these are really staggering numbers that we're dealing with. death. We also know that this is one of the leading issues that leads to when the trauma hasn't been resolved, that leads to sexual assault later in life. So there's a direct connection of what's going on here. We also know those that have had that exposure to domestic violence, they're seeing that violence in their home, that they're living this out day after day, that this also leads to other behaviors and things that absolutely impact then, how they respond to others as they grow into adult life and how they receive others. So what those healthy relationships may look like. And so our ability to be able to identify, to address, to intervene, we need to do, because if we don't deal with that trauma early, we know that we're setting up for a lifelong struggle.
What are some of the signs that a child may be experiencing abuse? What should we be looking for?
If you're an outsider looking in, sometimes what you may see is, certainly if it's physical abuse, you might see some bruising that really can't be explained on what that is. You might see some withdrawal behaviors are happening where they're not part of their regular or normal activities. You may see disassociation when they're in a school setting where they aren't able to focus. That could be for anything from physical abuse to domestic violence or sexual violence that's happening in the home. But you're going to see these changes in behaviors that are happening that way. For kids that are neglected, you may see that they don't have the proper clothing, they don't have the proper food to eat, things like this. You might see them losing a lot of weight, whatever that might be, and just in a state of neglect in that way. For others, you're seeing them as lost and not really doing so well because they aren't necessarily having those emotional connections where they need them. For any of us looking in, it's important to ask some questions about what's going on. Do you need anything? What might I be able to help with? Asking about how that what's going on. And certainly we see teachers are great for this in being able to recognize things. Schools are a big factor in a child's life, and they help to identify when these types of things are going on. Family members too sometimes get really concerned and will make those calls, those very difficult calls to make. But we know when you make that call, if we can get in, an assessment can be done, we can intervene early. And it doesn't mean that the family is going to be necessarily torn apart. It may mean that they're getting the resources they need to be able to work through some very difficult times, to learn some different behaviors. Some of us grew up in a time where spanking was, pretty much, that was the only parenting style. And although some of us, we may joke about it now, it's really not acceptable anymore to do that. There's other ways that we can parent and discipline our kids, and how we can put healthy boundaries in place to help people, progress. Beyond that is looking at who's having access to our kids and how do we identify when our child might be being groomed. How to identify when our family is being befriended because someone wants to have access to our children in that way. And so knowing some of those signs and what to look for is really important. And again, just knowing that, people are a call away and they really do want to help with that. And that both is through the Sexual Assault Center, the Child and Youth Advocacy Center, and a number of other resources that we have in the city of Lethbridge.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned a lot of things there. And of course, it can manifest itself in a number of different ways. Like you were mentioning neglect. I mean, it doesn't just come in the form of physical abuse. So what are some of the main types of child abuse?
Really, we see the predominant thing that we see is actually sexual abuse, which is, probably the scariest of them all. If you talk to people, this is what they shy away from talking the most about, is that this can happen to those that are under the age of 18, and it happens to people of all ages. And it's, people do prey on the vulnerable. And the more vulnerable we are, and children certainly meet that criteria of being vulnerable, there is there are predators that are looking for that. So for us to be able to break that cycle, I'm sorry, to answer your question. So sexual abuse is the main one we're seeing. We're also seeing physical abuse. We're seeing a lot of exposure to domestic violence in this area, emotional neglect and neglect. So those are the 5 primary areas that we're seeing. And again, we deal mostly with the sexual abuse, the severe physical abuse, and the neglect.
Yeah, you were mentioning before some stats there. I'm just curious, how prevalent is it in our society? Did you say 6,800 cases locally in the region?
I said that's what the 34% would work out to when we look at the population of children in the city of Lethbridge. So it is a 34% prevalence rate for sexual abuse itself, let alone for other forms of abuse. But it is like, almost, 1 in 3 children that are experiencing some form of abuse in our society. So it is quite high when we're looking at this. And again, we see the same thing when we look at adults when it comes to sexual assault. It is quite high. And so there's lots of ways that we can intervene and that we need to intervene and really see this and have these fruitful conversations so that people can take the topic seriously and to make those reports, even when they're feeling, I don't want to get involved. We know we all don't want our neighbors to be mad at us or to have that, awful situation, but we always have to put those children first.
Yeah, we kind of have a role as individuals in society to help. Almost like it takes a village to raise a child. It's kind of true in that case, isn't it?
It's absolutely true. I mean, first, it is legislated that we are supposed to doing that. There is, fines that you can receive if you fail to, if you knowingly neglect reporting child abuse that's happening. They rarely take issue with that, but I think morally we have that obligation. Very much like you said, it is a village that raises a child, and we have to be looking out for each other in this society if we really want to make those changes.
Right. Christine, about a year ago or so, the Chinook Sexual Assault Center opened a new facility for the Chinook Child and Youth Advocacy Center. So maybe tell us about some of the features of this new facility and why it's important.
Uh, Fantastic. Yes, so this is actually based on 40 years of evidence-based research. It actually originated out of Alabama and is widely used throughout the world, but predominantly in North America. So we're one of, I want to say, 8 child and youth advocacy centers in the province. What a child and youth advocacy center does is that it actually brings all those very messy pieces from police reporting or children's services, the medical exams, the need for psychologists, the school system, all together so that we can actually look at a case of child abuse. We call them triaging child abuse and seeing what those needs are. We can actually walk them through prepare them for a child forensic interview. So there's a process for that. And then actually work on those pathways to treatment and to healing for the child and the family. So the work isn't done independent of the family. It's done with the family, with the child for it to be most successful, and then to see them successfully through the court case. Where the child interview becomes really critical is that quite often children had to tell their story not one time, but several times. So they may be telling it to the doctor, they may be telling it to the police, they may be telling it to children's services. And every time that they're having to tell their story, they're being re-traumatized in that abuse that they've suffered. So having a really well-constructed child forensic interview is paramount to the success of the court case. And so at the end of the day, hopefully you have more people that are able to be convicted of these crimes, which again helps to mitigate those risks to other children. So part of that is we'll identify one interviewer for that child. And if, let's say, if it's police doing the interview, children's services would sit in a monitoring room and be able to get their notes at exactly the same time of what this is. When the tape is really well done, that tape then can be submitted to court as evidence. The child doesn't have to go into court to state what the abuse was. They still have to be cross-examined, but they don't have to state again what they went through. So again, you limit the number of times the child has to speak directly to the type of abuse that they endured.
Right. That's amazing. And that's the case with any victim that has to go through this again and again. Is there any thoughts on that happening for anybody that's been through a horrific situation?
Absolutely. Well, even, there's always a misnomer when people think that they have to come to a sexual assault center, they have to tell us all the details of the sexual assault, and you don't. We aren't secondary witnesses to the crime. We know it's horrible. We believe you, and we just want to know how you're doing and how you need to get to that next step of where you want to be. So that's what we're here for. And so I think there is, police are much more trauma informed than what they were before on this. And so this is why this model is widely adopted throughout North America. Is we want to do better by the kids, and we know if we can do better with the children, we're going to do better with the adults in time. That we're actually going to circumvent children growing up to being abused yet again and again, or the possibility that other harm is going to be done to other people. And so these are those ways to actually mitigate those types of risks in our society and to help people really thrive, because everyone needs that fair shot to make it through life and to be contributing citizens. So
Definitely.
yeah.
What about the work that you're doing to prevent abuse from happening? Are you working kind of with the parents that have sort of been doing this, or is it more of a let's get in front of the issue before it even gets there?
I guess there's two different ways that we work with things. When it comes to the Child and Youth Advocacy Center, the work is done with the non-offending parent and the family members that are connected with that child for that support. And again, how they're attaching with that child, how they're supporting that child, if there's other children who've been abused in the home as well, and how they're going to, reconstruct their lives after this, and how to move forward with that and what those child needs are. And so that's that therapy process. So both through some Connect parenting groups that are done, and some other groups that are done, as well as some therapy that is done by the folks that we have here. The other side is that there's an early intervention program that we have that's called Who Do You Tell, which we take out to schools. And it's a 1 hour program. We go in and we talk about, who do you tell if something is going on in your life that, is pretty scary. And so the difference between keep and speak a secret. So the keep secrets are, the fun surprise birthday party that's coming up. The speak secrets are the ones that are causing harm, that are making you feel awful inside. And sometimes telling their parents may not be the safest person in their life to tell, right?
Sad but true. Yeah.
Sad but true. And we've seen this happen in, athletic programs with gymnastics and things like this. It might be a coach that's doing something or a player on a team that's doing something, whatever that is. Who can they go to if something is disrupting their life in this way? And so that's what the program's about. And we come back for a second time. And actually, we've had a number of disclosures that have come through this process. What that helps to do is it sets the stage that kids first know that it's good to talk about this, that it's okay to talk about this. So when someone's asked them to keep a secret that's this awful, that they don't have to keep it, that there's places they can go to. So that's more of an early intervention type program. The other thing we do is we go out and we do training, and we've done training with churches, we've done training with professionals, with other agencies, with community groups that just want to know more about child abuse, want to know more about how to receive disclosures, and we do that type of training as well. So again, let's not be scared of the language, and let's talk openly about child abuse. Let's talk about sexual abuse and sexual assault, because these are the realities that are happening in our world, and we do need to address them. And so how do we get people comfortable with that language so that we can actually move forward and address these issues and be healthier? And most of us, we all want our kids to grow up to pay their own bills, but to be healthy and to be happy. And so these are ways that we can do that. And so let's move that forward.
Wow, such important work that you all do down there at the Chinook Sexual Assault Center, and such a heavy topic. But thanks so much for being with us today, Christine.
Thank you so much.
Yes, appreciate having you on. Christine Cassie is the CEO of the Chinook Sexual Assault Center in Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.